Life seemed perfect. I had a successful career, a loving wife, Jen, and a cozy home we both cherished. Our mornings were filled with shared coffee and laughter, our evenings with quiet dinners and talks about our dreams. I believe we had it all. But then small cracks began to appear. It started subtly. Jen began acting distant, her laughter less genuine, her eyes avoiding mine. I noticed she spent more time on her phone, often smiling at messages she wouldn't share with me. It bothered me, but I told myself it was nothing. Everyone has their private moments, right? One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I decided to ask, Jen, is everything okay? You seem distant lately. She looked up from her phone, surprised. What do you mean? Everything's fine, Ian. Just busy with work and stuff. I nodded, forcing a smile. Okay, just making sure. The next few weeks were a blur of work and silence. Jen's weekend getaways with her friends, Ashley and Gloria, became more frequent. She always had an excuse, some spa retreat or girls' night out. I wanted to believe her, but doubt began to gnaw at me. One Thursday evening, as Jen packed for yet another weekend trip, I tried again. Jen, can we talk before you go? She sighed, not looking up. Ian, I really don't have time. There are only a few days left of this project, and I need this break. Deal with it, okay. Her words stung, but I kept my calm. You know, it really hurts when you brush me off like that. I'm trying to talk to you. She paused, finally meeting my eyes. I'm sorry. I just need some space. We'll talk when I get back, I promise. But her promises felt hollow. The following weekend, I sat alone in our living room, my mind racing. Was I imagining things? Was I overreacting? I picked up my laptop, hoping to distract myself with work, but my thoughts kept returning to Jen. What was she really doing on these trips? When Jen returned, she seemed more relaxed, but her distance remained. I decided to let it go, convincing myself it was all in my head. But one evening, as we prepared dinner together, I couldn't hold back any longer. Jen, we need to talk about these trips. I feel like you're slipping away from me. She turned, a flash of annoyance crossing her face. Ian, not this again. I told you, I need these breaks. But why do you need them so often? Why do you need to be away from me? Her face softened, but she didn't answer right away. It's not about being away from you. It's about needing time for myself. Please understand that. I wanted to believe her, but the seeds of doubt had already taken root. As we finished dinner in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that our perfect life was just an illusion. As the days turned into weeks, those small cracks widened. I found myself watching Jen more closely, noticing every little thing she did. Her laughter with friends seemed forced. Her smiles didn't reach her eyes. The woman I loved was slipping away, and I felt powerless to stop it. One evening, as we sat quietly on the couch, I tried one last time. Jen, I miss us. I miss talking to you, really talking. Can we try to find our way back to each other? She looked at me, her eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't understand. I miss us too, Ian, but maybe we just lost our way. Her words echoed in my mind long after she had gone to bed. I sat alone in the dark, the illusion of our blissful life shattered. The perfect life I thought we had was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to hold on. And so I sat there, in the quiet of our home, realizing that the illusion of bliss was just that, an illusion. The perfect life we had built was crumbling, and all I could do was watch. As days turned into weeks, my doubts grew louder. Jen's absences and her strange behavior left me restless. The woman who once shared everything with me now seemed like a stranger. Our home, once filled with warmth and laughter, felt cold and silent. The whispers of doubt echoed in every corner, growing louder each day. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, my mind replayed our last conversation. Jen's words, maybe we just lost our way, haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I needed answers. I decided to call Ashley, one of Jen's closest friends. She had always been friendly and open, and I hoped she might shed some light on Jen's behavior. Hey, Ashley, it's Ian. I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, hi, Ian. How are you? she replied cheerfully. I'm okay. Listen, I wanted to ask you something about Jen. Had she seemed different to you lately? There was a brief pause before Ashley answered, different. How do you mean? She's been distant, spending a lot of time away. I just thought maybe you noticed something. Ashley hesitated. Well, she's mentioned being stressed about work. But Ian, you know how she is. She just needs space sometimes. Yeah, I guess I said that her answer didn't satisfy me. Thanks, Ashley. My next call was to Gloria. If anyone knew what was going on, it would be her. Gloria was Jen's confidant, the one she shared everything with. Hi, Gloria. It's Ian. Do you have a minute? Sure, Ian. What's up? Gloria's voice was warm and inviting. I'm worried about Jen. She's been acting so different lately. I thought maybe you could help me understand what's going on. There was a long silence. Ian, I don't think it's my place to say anything. Jen would want to talk to you herself. Her response made my heart sink. Please, Gloria. I just need to know if there's something I should be worried about. Gloria sighed heavily. Ian, just talk to Jen. That's all I can say. I felt more confused than ever. Ashley and Gloria's vague answers only fueled my suspicions. Determined to find the truth, I decided to go through Jen's things. It felt wrong, but I needed to know. In her closet, I found a hidden compartment in her travel bag. Inside were receipts from places she never mentioned, restaurants, hotels, and even a spa in Nashville. My heart raced as I pieced together the evidence. Jen had been lying to me. That night, as Jen came home, I confronted her. Jen, we need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked tired, but nodded. Okay, what's on your mind? I took a deep breath. I found some receipts in your bag, from places you never told me about. Why did you lie to me? Her eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with anger. You went through my things. How could you, Ian? How could I? I echoed, my voice rising. How could you lie to me? Where have you really been going on these weekends? Jen looked away, her face flushed with guilt. I needed a break. Things have been so stressful, and I didn't want to worry you. But you did worry me, Jen. You broke my trust. How can we fix this if you keep shutting me out? She sighed deeply, tears welling in her eyes. I'm sorry, Ian. I never meant to hurt you. Her apology felt empty, a mere bandage on a gaping wound. As she walked away, I realized our problems ran deeper than I had thought. The whispers of doubt had grown into a roar, and I knew our journey to the truth had only just begun. The rest of the night was a blur of restless thoughts and uneasy dreams. The perfect life I once believed in was unraveling, thread by thread, and all I could do was hold on and hope that somehow we could find our way back to each other. Determined to uncover the truth, I spent the next few days digging deeper into Jen's activities. The receipts I found were just the beginning. I needed to know more to understand why the woman I loved had become someone I couldn't recognize. I decided to track her movements more closely. Using a GPS tracker app, I followed her locations discreetly. It felt invasive, but the nagging doubts left me no choice. I had to know where she was really going. One Friday evening, Jen told me she was heading to the gym after work. She kissed me on the cheek, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, and left. As soon as she was out of sight, I checked the tracker. To my surprise, she wasn't heading to the gym at all. Her route took her across town to a small, unfamiliar address. My heart pounded as I drove to the location, parking a few blocks away. I watched from a distance as Jen entered a quaint little cafe. Through the window, I saw her meet a tall man with a goatee. They hugged briefly before sitting down. The sight of them together made my stomach churn. That night, I confronted Jen again. Jen, where were you tonight? I asked, my voice calm but strained. She looked up from her book, surprised. I told you, at the gym. I shook my head, the anger rising. No, you weren't. I followed you. I saw you with that man at the cafe. Who was he? Her face went pale. Ian, I can explain. Explain what, Jen? That you've been lying to me? That you've been seeing someone else? Tears welled in her eyes as she tried to find the words. He's just a friend, someone I can talk to. You've been so distant, and I needed someone to confide in. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A friend? Do friends meet in secret and lie about it? Jen, you've been hiding this from me for weeks. How can I trust you? She broke down, sobbing. I'm sorry, Ian. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt so alone, and he was there for me. Her confession only deepened the wound. How long has this been going on? Only a few weeks, she whispered. I swear, it's nothing serious. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I contacted a private investigator, someone I could trust to find the truth without bias. His name was Mike, a retired cop with a reputation for uncovering the dirtiest secrets. Mike, I need your help. My wife has been lying to me, and I need to know the truth, I explained. Mike nodded, his expression serious. I'll find out what's going on, Ian. Give me a few days. Those days felt like an eternity. I went through the motions of daily life, but my mind was always elsewhere, filled with fear and anger. When Mike finally called, his voice was grim. Ian, we need to talk. Can you meet me at my office? Sitting in Mike's small, cluttered office, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. He handed me a folder, thick with photos and documents. I followed Jen over the past week, he said. She's been meeting that man regularly. His name is Peter. They've been seen together at different places around town. I flipped through the photos, each one a dagger to my heart. Jen and Peter at restaurants, walking in the park, even entering a hotel together. It was more than I could bear. Thank you, Mike, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I needed to know. That night, I waited for Jen to come home. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. I placed the folder on the table between us. Jen, I know everything. I hired a private investigator. Her face crumpled as she realized the depth of her betrayal was laid bare. Ian, don't, I interrupted, my voice breaking. Just tell me why. Why did you do this to us? She sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face. I felt so lost, so disconnected from you. Peter was someone who listened, who made me feel alive again. But it was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I stood up, unable to look at her any longer. Mistake or not, you've broken us, Jen. I don't know if we can ever fix this. As I walked out of the room, leaving Jen sobbing behind me, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The lines had been unraveled, but at what cost? The perfect life I once believed in was shattered, and all that was left were the broken pieces of our love. The house was quiet when I returned, the air heavy with the tension of what was about to happen. Jen sat on the couch, her eyes red from crying, clutching a tissue in her hand. She looked up as I entered, her face a mask of fear and guilt. I took a deep breath and sat down across from her, the folder of evidence still fresh in my mind. Jen, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady but cold. She nodded, her hands trembling. I know, Ian. I know. I want to hear it from you, I began, keeping my gaze fixed on her. Tell me everything. Jen swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. It started a few months ago, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I was feeling so alone and disconnected from you. He was there for me. He listened when I felt like you didn't. Peter, I said, the name leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Who is he really? He's someone I met at a work event, she explained, her voice cracking. We started talking, and it got out of hand. I never meant for it to go this far, Ian. I swear. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. So all those weekends you said you were at the spa or with Ashley and Gloria, you were really with him. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'm so sorry, Ian. I never wanted to hurt you. I stood up, pacing the room, the betrayal cutting deeper with every word. Do you have any idea what you've done, Jen? You've destroyed everything we built together. She sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I know. I made a terrible mistake. I wish I could take it all back. I stopped and faced her, my voice rising with frustration. Why didn't you talk to me? Why did you turn to him instead of trying to fix things with me? Jen looked up, her eyes pleading. I tried, Ian. But every time I brought up my feelings, you seemed so distant, so wrapped up in your own world. I felt invisible. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Had I really been that blind? Had I ignored the signs that our marriage was falling apart? That doesn't excuse what you did, I said, my voice softening but still firm. You should have fought for us, not run away. She nodded, wiping her tears. You're right. I should have. I was weak, and I made the wrong choices. I sat back down, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. What do we do now, Jen? How do we move forward from this? She reached out, her hand trembling. I want to fix this, Ian. I want to make things right. I'll do anything. I looked at her hand, then back at her face. It's not that simple. Trust is broken. It takes time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. Jen nodded, her expression one of desperation and regret. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. I just don't want to lose you. I sighed, feeling the exhaustion of the past few weeks catch up with me. We'll see, Jen. This isn't something that can be fixed overnight. But for now, I need some space to think. She nodded, her eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. Take all the time you need. I'll be here waiting. As I walked out of the room, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. The confrontation had brought everything to the surface, but it also left me with more questions than answers. Could I ever truly forgive Jen? Could we ever find our way back to each other? Only time would tell. For now, all I knew was that the road ahead would be long and difficult, and nothing would ever be the same again. The days following our confrontation were some of the hardest I had ever experienced. The house felt emptier, the silence heavier. Jen moved out temporarily, staying with a friend while we figured out our next steps. It was a relief to have some space, but it also made the reality of our situation hit harder. I spent a lot of time thinking about what had happened and what to do next. The betrayal had cut deep, and I wasn't sure if our marriage could survive it. Friends and family offered their support, but their words felt hollow. Only time and introspection could provide the answers I sought. One evening, my best friend, Mark, came over. We sat on the porch, beers in hand, the quiet hum of the night surrounding us. How are you holding up? Mark asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. I sighed, taking a long sip of my beer. I don't know, man. It's like everything I thought I knew is just gone. Mark nodded. I can't imagine how hard this is for you, but you need to take care of yourself. Have you thought about talking to someone, like a therapist? I shrugged. I've thought about it, but I don't know if it will help. It might, Mark said gently. You can't carry this alone, Ian. It's too much for anyone to handle on their own. A few days later, I decided to take Mark's advice. I found a therapist named Dr. Hayes and made an appointment. The first session was tough, but it felt good to talk to someone who could offer an objective perspective. Dr. Hayes listened patiently as I poured out my feelings of betrayal, anger, and confusion. Ian, it's important to understand that healing from this will take time. Trust has been broken, and rebuilding it is a slow process, but it's not impossible. But how do I even start? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. By focusing on yourself first, Dr. Hayes replied. You need to heal before you can decide what's next for your marriage. Take things one day at a time. Meanwhile, the legal process of our separation began. Jen and I had several difficult conversations about dividing our assets, the house, and our finances. It was a painful reminder of how much we had shared and how much we stood to lose. One evening, Jen and I sat at the dining table, stacks of papers before us. The tension was palpable. I never wanted it to come to this, Jen said quietly, her eyes downcast. Neither did I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But we can't change what happened. We can only try to move forward. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I still love you, Ian. I hope you know that. I know, I said, though the words felt hollow. But love isn't enough to fix this. We need time, and maybe space, to figure out who we are now. As the weeks turned into months, I focused on rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old hobbies, took up running, and spent more time with friends. It was a slow and painful process, but little by little, I began to find myself again. One afternoon while out for a run, I ran into an old friend, Sarah. We hadn't seen each other in years, but she had heard about what happened. I'm so sorry, Ian, she said, her eyes filled with sympathy. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. Thanks, Sarah, I replied, feeling a warmth in her words that I hadn't felt in a long time. I might take you up on that. As I continued to navigate the fallout of my marriage, I realized that healing wasn't a straight path. There were good days and bad days, moments of hope and despair. But through it all, I kept moving forward, determined to find a new sense of normalcy. Jen and I remained in contact, but our conversations were strained and awkward. We both knew that the road to any potential reconciliation would be long and difficult. For now, we were focused on ourselves, trying to heal from the wounds we had both inflicted and endured. The fallout of our marriage had left scars, but it also taught me the importance of resilience and self discovery. I was learning to live again, one step at a time, and that was a victory in itself. Months had passed since Jen and I decided to take a break. The initial shock and pain had begun to fade, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. We had both started therapy, individually and together, and were slowly learning to communicate again. The path to rebuilding trust was long and winding, but we were taking it one step at a time. One evening, I sat in Dr. Hayes' office, reflecting on the journey so far. It's been tough, I admit it. Some days I still feel so angry and hurt. Dr. Hayes nodded. That's completely normal, Ian. Trust is fragile, and rebuilding it takes time. What matters is that you're both committed to the process. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I just don't know if we'll ever get back to where we were. Think of it as building something new, Dr. Hayes suggested. Your relationship has changed, but that doesn't mean it can't be strong again. It will just be different. Jen and I had our next joint session a few days later. We sat across from each other, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Dr. Hayes began, "Today, let's talk about the small steps you've been taking to rebuild trust." Jen looked at me, her eyes hopeful. I've been trying to be more open, to share my feelings instead of hiding them. It's hard, but I want you to know I'm committed to this. I nodded. I've noticed and I appreciate it. I've been working on my own issues too, trying to be more present and listen better. Dr. Hayes smiled. That's a good start. Trust is built through consistent, honest communication. Keep talking to each other, even when it's difficult. Outside of therapy, Jen and I made an effort to spend more quality time together. We took long walks, rediscovering the simple joy of each other's company. One sunny Saturday afternoon, we found ourselves at our favorite park, the one we used to visit when we first started dating. "Remember this place?" I asked, a smile tugging at my lips. Jen laughed softly. How could I forget? We spent so many weekends here, just talking and dreaming about the future. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. Maybe we can start making new memories here. She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'd like that, Ian. I really would. As weeks turned into months, the small steps began to add up. We started sharing more of our daily lives, the mundane and the significant. Trust wasn't something that could be rushed, but with each honest conversation, we felt a little closer to each other. One evening, we decided to cook dinner together, something we hadn't done in a long time. As we chopped vegetables and stirred pots, the kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked food. "This feels nice," Jen said, glancing at me. "Like old times." "Yeah, it does," I agreed. It's the little things that make a big difference, I think. We sat down to eat, the silence between us no longer uncomfortable but companionable. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. Rebuilding trust also meant addressing the deeper issues that had led to the breakdown in the first place. During one particularly challenging therapy session, Jen finally opened up about her feelings of isolation and disconnection. "I felt so alone, Ian," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know how to reach you, and that's when I made the worst mistake of my life." I reached out, taking her hand. "I'm sorry you felt that way. I should have seen it, should have done something." Dr. Hayes interjected gently. "It's important to acknowledge these feelings, but also to forgive yourselves. You're both human, and you both made mistakes. What matters is how you move forward from here. Slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. We learned to be vulnerable with each other, to share our fears and hopes without judgment. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks, but we kept pushing forward. One night, as we lay in bed, Jen turned to me, her voice soft. Do you think we'll make it, Ian? I looked into her eyes, filled with a cautious hope. I think we have a chance. As long as we keep trying, we have a chance. The journey to rebuild trust was far from over, but with each passing day, it felt a little more possible. We were learning to trust each other again, step by step, and that was enough for now. The road ahead was uncertain, but we were walking it together, and that made all the difference. A year had passed since the day Jen and I decided to rebuild our relationship. It had been a long and difficult journey, but as we stood on the threshold of our new beginning, I felt a sense of hope and possibility that I hadn't felt in a long time. One sunny morning, we decided to revisit the park where we had shared so many memories. As we walked hand in hand, the familiar sights and sounds filled me with a sense of nostalgia. Do you remember the first time we came here? I asked, smiling at Jen. She laughed, her eyes sparkling. Of course I do. You tried to impress me by climbing that big oak tree and ended up getting stuck. I chuckled, shaking my head. Yeah, and you had to call the park ranger to get me down. Not my finest moment. Jen squeezed my hand, but it was one of the moments that made me fall in love with you. Your willingness to go the extra mile, even if it meant getting stuck in a tree. We found a bench and sat down, watching the children play and the couple stroll by. It felt like we were reclaiming a piece of our past, but with the promise of a better future. In the months that followed, we focused on building new traditions. We started a weekly date night, taking turns planning activities that allowed us to reconnect and have fun. One evening, as we sat in a cozy little restaurant, Jen looked at me with a thoughtful expression. Ian, I've been thinking, she began. What if we take a trip together? Just the two of us, somewhere we've never been. I raised an eyebrow. A trip. Where to? She smiled, excitement lighting up her face. How about Italy? We've always talked about going, and I think it could be a fresh start for us. I considered her suggestion, feeling a thrill of anticipation. Italy sounds perfect. Let's do it. Planning the trip gave us something to look forward to and brought us closer. We pored over maps, guidebooks, and travel blogs, dreaming about the places we would visit and the experiences we would share. It felt like we were building a new chapter in our lives, one filled with adventure and discovery. When the day of our departure finally arrived, we were both buzzing with excitement. As the plane took off, Jen turned to me, her eyes shining. I can't believe we're actually doing this, she said, her voice filled with wonder. Me neither, I replied, squeezing her hand. Here's to new beginnings. Italy was everything we had hoped for and more. We wandered through the narrow streets of Rome, marveled at the art in Florence, and enjoyed the romantic canals of Venice. Each day was a new adventure, a new memory to cherish. One evening, as we watched the sunset over the Tuscan hills, Jen turned to me, her expression serious. Ian, I want you to know how grateful I am for this second chance, she said softly. I know it hasn't been easy, but I believe we're stronger now because of it. I took her hand, feeling a deep sense of love and appreciation. I feel the same way. We've come a long way, and I'm proud of us. I know we can face anything as long as we're together. Returning home, we brought back not only souvenirs, but a renewed sense of purpose and commitment. We continued our therapy sessions, making sure to address any lingering issues and maintain open communication. One afternoon, as we sat in our living room, Jen turned to me with a smile. I have a surprise for you. Oh, what is it? I asked, curious. She handed me a small, beautifully wrapped box. Inside was a key with a tag that read, "To our future." I had a duplicate made for the cabin upstate, she explained. I thought we could make it our getaway spot, a place where we can recharge and reconnect whenever we need to. I felt a lump in my throat as I looked at the key. Jen, this is perfect. Thank you. The cabin became our sanctuary, a place where we could escape the hustle and bustle of daily life and focus on each other. We spent weekends hiking, cooking together, and simply enjoying the peace and quiet. It was a reminder of how far we had come and how much we had to look forward to. As I stood on the porch of the cabin one evening, watching the stars twinkle above, I realized that our journey was far from over. But we had built a strong foundation, one based on trust, love, and a shared commitment to our future. Here's to new beginnings, I whispered, feeling a deep sense of contentment. And as Jen joined me on the porch, wrapping her arms around me, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our new beginning was just the start of a beautiful, hopeful journey